Today it's going to be about landscape photography using a telephoto lens, and the lens that I'm going to use today is going to be the 70 to 200mm f4 image stabilized on my Canon EOS R. Hey everybody, my name is Toma, Phototom here on YouTube. I'm a full-time landscape and travel photographer, and this channel is all about landscape, travel photography, and from time to time some gear reviews. So if you are to see more similar videos, make sure to subscribe. Now let's get back to the topic from today. The main purpose of the telephoto is to isolate things. Yes, the consequence is that it's going to get things closer to you in camera at least, but the main idea is to think about isolating things. And when you think about it this way, you're going to have a wider range of situations where you want to use the telephoto. So very quickly, here are some situations where I'm using the telephoto. The first thing, I see an element that is in the distance and I can't get there. I want to isolate it from the rest of the landscape. I'm using a telephoto. Or there are elements that are really big, like for example an entire village or an entire area of a mountain. I want to capture it all. I have to stay further away from those elements, and of course I need to use a telephoto to capture only those elements. If I'm going to use a wide angle lens, then I'm going to have everything in the shot. Another situation is when the nature is, as you can see around me, there are no leaves on the trees. In these situations, you want to isolate different elements to make them look interesting. You have to search for small elements that are interesting, and you can isolate them using a telephoto lens. And the fourth situation is when I want to do a panorama, especially if I'm in the mountains. I'm doing a panorama using a telephoto because I want to have close-up shots that compose a really huge image that offers you a lot of details. And now in the video from today, I'm going to try and show you how I'm photographing in different situations. Unfortunately, I'm not in the mountains to show off all my expertise, all the skills that I have. I'm just around my town, and I'm gonna have to maximize the situations that I'm in. So let's get started. The first situation is over here. I'm on top of a hill, I'm above a village. There is a beautiful church in the distance, and there is a road that takes you to the church. Now I want to capture that. I want to capture the church with a few houses. And for that I'm going to use the longer end of my telephoto, the 200mm, and I'm going to try to capture the road that goes up and ends up to the church. Now a quick tip in a situation like this: all the roofs are different and some of them are really bright. You don't want to have really bright houses, white houses or white roofs, really close to the edge of your photo, because that will draw the attention from your main subject. If you're using a DSLR, make sure to have your mirror lockup on. In this way you avoid any shakiness and you have sharp photos. Also make sure to use the remote control. The settings for this photo are ISO 100, f8 and 100th of a second. I also have my polarizer on. The reason is, even in a weather like this, where there is not a there's not a visible sun, there are some elements that still have some shininess to them. There are situations when you don't want to use the polarizer. For example, the same place, the same location, same frame. It was raining the night before, and the road was covered in water. It was wet. Now the asphalt, when it's wet, it's black. Lucky for me, there was the light of the sun shining in the water from the road, and it was creating a streak of light that highlighted the road and took you to the church. Now, if I would have polarized in a situation like that, I would have, of course, took the shininess off the road, and the road would be a simple black line. Then that would not look good in my photo. So you need to judge for yourself if you need to use the polarizer or you don't want to use the polarizer. I just saw a tree in the valley, and the particular thing about that tree is that the trunk is not completely white. It's not a birch tree, but the tree, it's kind of like a grayish white, and the rest of the trees are like oranges, yellow oranges or something like this. Because of that, I think the tree looked interesting, and I frame it surrounded by all those other trees. As you can see in editing, I decided to slightly desaturate all the other elements. I'm not going for completely black and white. I'm just desaturating the rest of the elements a little bit, and this helps pop the tree some more. It makes the tree more interesting. Now, as settings, I'm at f8 ISO 100 and 1/60th of a second, and now it's time to move on to another location to find a small forest where to search for close-ups or interesting elements that would be interesting to photograph with the telephoto. I'm in the forest right now, and I saw a tree that I liked. It's a big tree. The forest is really thick. It doesn't have those wide trails that you usually see in my forest photography vlogs. But I found an interesting tree, an interesting looking tree, and I will try to frame it really low, also capturing some really small trees around that big one with some dark brown leaves still on them. The aperture is gonna be around 5.6. I want to separate a little bit the tree from the background. Right now I have another problem, and that is that hard light in the forest. When I left home, the sky was completely covered by clouds, but things changed. Having a forest with all those patches of light doesn't look that interesting. I found some mushrooms in the forest, and these are the kind of details that you want to look for. Small elements, interesting roots, mushrooms like this. Now, the only thing is that I need to wait for the sun to go behind the cloud and have some even light to photograph them. I also try to photograph it in this light. Maybe it looks interesting, I don't know. Because I'm going to use the telephoto, I'm not going to have all those areas of patches of light, and maybe it will look interesting. I'll just have to wait until I get home and see. The way I'm going to photograph it is staying really low and having some space in the background, because you want to have that separation, right? You don't want to photograph from this direction because the image will be flat. You will lack dimension and depth to the photo. So you stay really low, and you have that. And then you have f4 or f5.6, and of course the 200 millimeters end of the lens. In a situation like this, the tip would be to experiment and try different compositions, different framings, because we're dealing with details. There is nothing specific like a trail in the forest or the shape of the mountains. It's just chaos, it's just clutter. So you need to work around it, you need to move around, you need to try different settings, different orientation, landscape mode, portrait mode, and it's just a matter of you spending some time to find an interesting thing to photograph in the given situation. There's a tree over there in the distance, and it has some particular leaves, some really thin ones, and the sun is coming from that direction and makes those leaves pop. It looks like all the leaves are on fire, and because the forest behind it's dark, this will separate the tree very well. Now, in terms of settings, it's the same f8 ISO 100 and 100th of a second. It's not something special. But the tip would be to look out for elements like this. When you have an element in light and then you have another element behind it in darkness, basically an element of light surrounded by areas of darkness, it looks really, really well. Another interesting situation is right here, where there are some trees that create a frame inside the frame, if you want. And there is kind of like a trail in the forest. It's not a true trail, it's just the way the trees grow in that area. But because of that particular element, you can frame that and create kind of like a tunnel. Now the focus is going to be in the background, but you're going to need an aperture close enough. You don't want all those framing elements to be in blur, because this will look really, really nasty. A big element that it's blurred, and also in the foreground it doesn't look that interesting. Now, a particular tip for a situation like this is to have an area of darkness in the beginning of your photo, and that will surround a small area of light in the background, and this will help the eye go from the lower part of the photo to the upper part of the photo where there is light. Other close-ups that you can do inside the forest involve you looking down, basically. So you're looking at the green moss from the trees, details in the bark of the trees, details in plants on the ground, different rotten roots, stone elements, or the way the stones are on the ground. So there are all sorts of things that you can photograph in a moment like this, when nature is not that beautiful, if you want. But nature is always beautiful, but it's not that photogenic, and also the light is not that interesting to take photos. Now, I hope you enjoyed this vlog. If you have something to ask or something to add, just use the comment section below. If you want to learn more about my editing process, there's a link in the description of my video. For 14 days you can watch all my courses for free on Skillshare. And until next time, keep on photographing. It's the only way to get better. Bye bye.